I was standing on my father's doorstep in the rain. I had nowhere else to go. I knocked and he opened the door and looked at me. And then he said the words that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, "You are not my family anymore." And he closed the door. 3 months later at my brother's birthday party, my grandfather stood up from his chair. And what he said next made my father unable to look anyone in that room in the eye. Welcome to Haely Stories. This is the place where you will find real and emotional women's stories that will touch your heart, make you feel seen, and remind you that you are never alone in what you are going through. If that is something you need in your life, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a single story. Now let me tell you about the night my father closed the door on me. In the afternoon my grandfather made sure everyone understood what that meant. My name is Serena Cozy and I am 29 years old. Want to start by telling you something about the kind of daughter I was, because I think it matters to the story. I was the daughter who called every Sunday. The daughter who remembered birthdays and showed up for family occasions and asked after relatives by name and genuinely meant it. I was the daughter who had spent most of her adult life trying to maintain a relationship with a father who made that relationship difficult, not because she did not see the difficulty but because she believed that family was worth the effort of trying, believed that for a very long time. And my father's name is Gerald. He is 57 years old and he has been a complicated man for as long as I can remember. Not cruel in the dramatic sense. Complicated in the quiet and grinding sense that some parents are complicated. He had favorites and I was not one of them. He had expectations and I did not always meet them. He had a version of what his family should look like and I had, at various points in my life, not fit that version. My brother Marcus, who is 3 years younger than me, fit it perfectly. Marcus was easy and agreeable and interested in the things my father was interested in and had made choices that my father approved of. I loved Marcus. I want to be clear about that. What existed between my father and Marcus was not Marcus's fault. It was simply the reality of how my father distributed his love, unevenly and without much awareness that he was doing it. Had made my peace with being the less favored child a long time ago. Or I thought I had, and then came the night I knocked on my father's door in the rain. I need to tell you how I ended up on that doorstep because the how matters. Had been living with my partner for 2 years. His name is not important to this story. What is important is that the relationship ended, abruptly and painfully, in a way that left me without a home because the apartment was his and I had no alternative arrangements and no time to make them gracefully. Had savings. Not enough for a deposit and first month and last month on a new apartment immediately, but enough to manage for a while if I had somewhere to stay in the interim. I had already called 2 friends. One was in the middle of a family situation that made hosting impossible. The other had a 1-room apartment with no space. I had called my mother, who lived 3 hours away and had a spare room and had said yes immediately, but 3 hours away meant 3 hours from my job and I had a situation at work that made being 3 hours away untenable for at least the next 2 weeks. My father lived 20 minutes from my former apartment. He had a 4-bedroom house. He had a spare room that had been a spare room for 5 years. I called him before I went. I explained the situation. I asked if I could stay for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, while I sorted out my arrangements. He said he would think about it and call me back. He did not call back. I waited 4 hours. I called again. He did not answer. It was raining. I had 2 bags and nowhere to go and a father 20 minutes away who was not answering his phone. Drove to his house and knocked on my father's door at 8:30 in the evening. He answered after the second knock. He was in his house clothes. He had clearly been home for hours. He looked at me standing on his doorstep with 2 bags and rain on my face, and he did not immediately say anything. I said, "Dad," I called. I explained what happened. "I just need 2 weeks." He looked at me for a moment, and then he said, "I talked to Patricia about it." Patricia is my father's partner. They have been together for 4 years. She is a pleasant woman in small doses who has, in my experience, a great deal of influence over my father's decisions and not always in directions that I have found easy. I said, "Okay," he said, "Patricia is not comfortable with it. She feels it would be an intrusion on our space." I stood in the rain and I looked at my father. I said, "Dad, I am your daughter. I need somewhere to stay for 2 weeks." He said, "I understand that. But this is Patricia's home too and I have to respect her feelings." I said, "Are you telling me you will not let me stay?" I looked at somewhere that was not my face. He said, "I think it is better if you make other arrangements." I said, "Dad, look at me. I am standing in the rain with 2 bags. I have nowhere to go tonight." He looked at me then, and he said, "Serena, I am sorry. But I have to think about my household. You are an adult. You will figure it out." And then he said the part that I have never been able to forget. He said, "You made your choices. You are not my responsibility anymore. You are not really family in that sense." He closed the door. I stood on his doorstep for a moment, then I walked back to my car and I sat in it in the rain for a long time. I drove to my mother that night. 3 hours in the rain. I called her from the car and told her what had happened and she said, "Come, just come." And I drove and she was awake when I arrived and she made tea and she did not say much because she knew me well enough to know I did not need words right then. I stayed with my mother for 2 weeks. I managed the work situation with more difficulty than I had hoped, but I managed it. I found an apartment within the month. I moved my life forward the way you move your life forward when something has happened that you are not yet ready to fully process. Did not call my father, he did not call me. My grandfather called me. His name is Edmund and he is 74 years old and he is my father's father and he has always been the most honest person in our family. Not brutally honest. Carefully honest. The kind of man who says what he means and means what he says and has spent 74 years being consistent about both. He called me 2 weeks after the night on the doorstep. He said he had heard what had happened. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted me to know that what my father had done was wrong and that he was not going to pretend otherwise. I said, "Grandpa, you do not need to get involved." He said, "I am already involved. You are my granddaughter." He said it simply. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You are my granddaughter." I cried after that call. The full kind. The kind that had been waiting since the doorstep. The 3 months between the doorstep and my brother's birthday were a strange period. Was building a new life in a new apartment and doing it with the particular determination of someone who has been told they are not family and has decided to prove, quietly and without audience, that they do not need to be. I was also grieving. Not dramatically. In the background. The slow grief of a relationship that had never been quite what you needed and has now confirmed that it will never be what you need. My brother Marcus called me once in those 3 months. He said he had heard what happened and he was sorry. I believed that he was sorry. Marcus is not a bad person and he was caught between a sister he loved and a father he was close to and he handled it the way he handled most difficult things, with good intentions and not quite enough courage. Invited me to his birthday party. He said it was going to be a family dinner, small, at my father's house, and he wanted me there. He said he had spoken to our father and our father had agreed I could come. Almost did not go. I talked to my mother about it. She said, "Go. Not for your father. For Marcus. And for yourself. Because not going is letting your father decide what you are allowed to be part of and you should not let him do that." I talked to my grandfather about it. He said, "Go. I will be there. Something about the way he said it made me decide to my brother's birthday was on a Saturday afternoon. Arrived at my father's house with a gift for Marcus and the particular composure of someone who has prepared themselves carefully for a situation they are not sure about. Patricia answered the door. She was pleasant in the way she was always pleasant, warmly and at a slight distance, and she showed me in without any acknowledgement of what had happened 3 months earlier. I did not expect one. I had not come for one. Marcus hugged me immediately and genuinely, and I was glad I had come for that alone. Why father greeted me with the careful civility of someone navigating a situation they have not resolved. Not warm. Not cold. Managed. I matched his managed with my own and we coexisted in the same house for the first hour without anything significant happening. My grandfather was there. He was sitting in the chair he always sat in at family gatherings, the armchair near the window, and he watched me come in and he caught my eye and he nodded once in the particular way that meant I see you and I am here. We had dinner. It was Marcus's birthday and Marcus was happy and I focused on that. I focused on my brother's happiness because that was why I had come and because focusing on it was easier than focusing on the fact that I was sitting at a table with a man who had closed his door on me in the rain. And then my grandfather put down his fork. He did not stand up dramatically. He was 74 years old and he did things at his own pace and with his own deliberateness. He put down his fork. He picked up his glass of water. He cleared his throat in the way he did when he was about to say something. Everyone looked at him. That was what happened when Edmund cleared his throat. People looked. He said, I want to say something. On the occasion of Marcus's birthday and with everyone here, Marcus said, of course, Grandpa. My grandfather looked around the table. At Marcus. At Patricia. At my father. At me. Then he said, I have been part of this family for 74 years. I have watched it grow and change and I have watched the people in it make choices that I agreed with and choices that I did not. I have tried, for most of my life, not to interfere in things that were not my business. He paused, said, 3 months ago my granddaughter came to this house in the rain with nowhere to go and she was turned away. I have not said anything about it until now because I was trying to find the right moment and the right words. I think this is the right moment. The table was very quiet. My father was looking at his plate and my grandfather said, Gerald, you told your daughter she was not family. I want you to understand something. You do not get to decide who is family. Family is not something you grant and revoke based on your convenience. Serena is your daughter. She is my granddaughter. She will be family until the last one of us is gone and no door you close will change that. He looked at my father steadily. He said, I love you, son. But what you did was wrong. And I will not sit at a family table. And pretend it did not happen. Then he picked up his fork and continued eating. Nobody spoke for a moment. Marcus looked at his plate. Patricia looked at the window. My father continued looking at his plate but with a quality of stillness that was different from before. I looked at my grandfather. He was eating his dinner with the complete calm of a man who had said what he needed to say and was now finished with it. Wanted to say something and I did not trust my voice so I said nothing. It was Marcus who spoke first. He said, quietly and to no one in particular, I think Grandpa is right. My father looked up. Marcus said, Dad, I did not say anything at the time because I did not know how. But I think what happened was wrong. Serena is my sister. She needed help and she was turned away. That is not okay. My father said, Marcus said, I am not trying to ruin my birthday. I am saying something that needs to be said. Patricia said, perhaps this is not the time. My grandfather said, with great gentleness, I think this is exactly the time. The right time for honest things is whenever they can finally be said. My father sat with all of it. He was not a man who processed things quickly in front of people. I watched him sit with it and I did not try to hurry him. Then he looked at me. He said, "Serena," I said. "Dad." He did not say anything else right then. But the way he said my name was different from the careful civility of earlier in the evening. It was something more than that. Something that had been moved. My father called me the following Tuesday, answered because I had decided, after the birthday dinner, that I was not going to close doors even when doors had been closed on me. That was not the kind of person I wanted to be, he said. I have been thinking about what your grandfather said. I said, okay, he said. And what Marcus said. I said, okay. He was quiet for a moment. My father was not a man who apologized easily. I knew that. I had known it my whole life. The apology, if it came, was going to cost him something and the cost was going to be visible, he said. I handled things badly in November. I should not have turned you away. I should not have said what I said. I said, which part? He said, any of it. All of it. You are my daughter. You needed help. I should have helped you. I said, yes. You should have, he said. Patricia and I have talked about it. She understands now that she should not have had the influence she had over that decision. That was also wrong, I said. I appreciate you saying that, he said. I do not know how to fix it. I do not know if it can be fixed completely. But I wanted to say it. I said, Dad, the fact that you called matters. The fact that you said it matters. That is where we start, he said. Okay, I said, okay. It was not everything, but it was something real. And something real was more than I had expected from that phone call when I answered it. Went to see my grandfather the week after the birthday party, was in his garden when I arrived, moving between his plants with the unhurried attention he always gave to things he cared about. He looked up when he heard the gate and raised one hand. I sat on the bench outside his back door and waited for him to finish. He took his time. He always took his time. When he came and sat beside me I said, you did not have to do that, he said. I know I did not have to. I said, it must have been difficult. Saying that to your own son in front of everyone, he said, it was not comfortable. But comfortable is not always the point, I said. What made you decide to say it then? At Marcus's birthday, he thought about it for a moment. He said, I had been waiting for a moment when your father might actually hear it. I have learned over 74 years that some things need an audience to land properly. Not because you want to embarrass someone, but because when something is said in front of people it cannot be walked back or reframed or quietly forgotten the way private conversations sometimes are. Your father needed to hear it in a way that would stay with him. I said, it stayed with him, he said. I know. He called me too, I said. What did he say? My grandfather was quiet for a moment, then he said he was ashamed. That is the word he used. Ashamed. I sat with that. My grandfather said, that is the right word. I am glad he found it. I am 29 years old and my father told me I was not his family and closed his door on me in the rain. And 3 months later my grandfather stood up at a birthday dinner and said the thing that needed to be said in the way that it needed to be said. Want to tell you what I have learned from all of it. Have learned that family is not a status that parents get to grant and revoke. It is something that exists independently of whether the people in it choose to honor it. My father closing that door did not make me not his daughter. It made him someone who had closed a door on his daughter. Those are very different things. I have learned that the people in your family who tell the truth, who say the hard thing at the right moment without flinching, are among the most valuable people you will ever know. My grandfather did not make my father feel small for the sake of it. He said what was true because it needed to be said and because he loved everyone in that room enough to say it. That kind of love is rare and I do not take it for granted. Have also learned something about forgiveness that I am still working through. My father called me. He said he was wrong. He is making an effort, imperfect and slow, but genuine, to be something different than he was on that doorstep. I am choosing to meet that effort with openness. Not because what he did was acceptable. It was not. But because I am not interested in spending the rest of my life defined by a closed door, would rather be defined by what I did after it. I found my apartment. I built my life. I showed up to my brother's birthday even when it would have been easier not to. I answered my father's call even when I did not know what he was going to say. Those are the choices that tell you who you are. My grandfather is still in his garden every morning. I visit on Sundays now. We drink tea and talk about nothing important and everything important, and I am grateful for every single one of those Sundays in a way I do not have adequate words for. My name is Serena Cozy. I am 29 years old. My father said I was not his family anymore. My grandfather stood up at my brother's birthday and changed everything, and I am still here. Still family. Still standing. That is my story. He closed a door on me in the rain and called it a decision. My grandfather opened his mouth at a birthday dinner and called it the truth. And the truth, said clearly and with love, has a way of opening doors that should never have been closed. Thank you for listening. This is Haely Stories. We will see you in the next one.